saw a video this morning featuring a woman talking about how chivalry was dead. But actually, it is stronger than ever. Chivalry is far more present today than ever before, but yet they don't realize it. You know, one of the things that you will find is a recurring theme for me is the idea that whenever you find something that is true, it repeats itself fractally at many levels. So the truths that we discover here at our level of perception occur at higher levels of perception, and those things that occur at higher level of perceptions happen at tiny microscopic levels of perception. Now, whenever you discover a truth, it repeats itself at different tiers of reality. Chivalry, this inclination that men have had to defer their preference for the preference of the woman, to set aside their needs for the need of the woman, to stand up and give her his chair, to open the door for her, to bow down to her. This is alive and well, but at a higher level. So what happened was essentially the institutions of power have grown. That goes without saying. Institutions of government and power have grown. And what are these institutions of power? Same applies to religion, churches, and these sorts of organizations. Those are institutions of power as well. These have grown. They're far bigger today than they ever were. But what do they represent? They represent masculine energy. And usually concentrated among a very small number of men. Like a church, there's the pastor, one guy. Or a country, there's a president. Although there's many more institutions surrounding the president as well. All of which are largely concentrations of power within a singular male. So what we've done as a society is we've delegated masculinity up to the alpha. And the alpha in this case would be whoever has power. Whoever has power over society, really. No longer power over a family, no longer power over a community or a tribe, power over a country or a whole nation or a whole belief system that expands throughout the world. We've delegated masculinity, or rather masculinity has concentrated itself in institutions of power. And these institutions have been just as much of a simp as most men have been historically, despite all of this power, and will bend the knee to women and will offer them whatever it is that they want. It doesn't matter how many men at the bottom get thrown under the bus. This institution of power will give her a seat in the Senate, will give her new laws and regulations that favor her over even her husband. So chivalry is alive and well. It's much more powerful and operating at a much bigger scale than it ever did. And fundamentally, it has functioned now, ironically, to emasculate 99% of men. So that tiny minority of very powerful men are much more, even much more masculine or much more alpha. And that's fundamentally what has happened. Women as a collective have gravitated toward the top G. government, Big Daddy. And it is happening at smaller scales too. The corporations. A corporation is a smaller institution of power, and it's largely a manifestation of masculine energy as well. And the women are offering themselves to that top G. All of these institutions are pulling women away from their husbands, their boyfriends, the men in their daily life. And whether consciously or unconsciously, serving to cut off the testicles of most men, so that the very top of the men in power get to essentially have all the women. This is what I call the porkyarchy. Women have complained about this thing called the patriarchy for a long time now. But I think what they really meant to say was porkyarchy. This is what I'm talking about. The proclivity of men to aspire to become an alpha, and in that position of sexual power and sexual authority, throw all the other men under the bus, whether it means sending them to war, or whether it means to pass laws and regulations that screws them over completely, distances them from their children, from their wives. It's the porkyarchy that is the enemy of men, actually. And I would say to women as well, because it doesn't serve women to have an emasculated husband and an emasculated father or grandfather. The needs of people are best served at a local level. The more proximal you can be to your source of sustenance, the better. But we have far departed from that. And I'm constantly running up against this as a man. Like just the other day, I got into a conversation with my first ex-wife about me really wanting to teach my son how to drive. Kind of a recurring issue with this person, my first ex, is her always wanting to take certain things like that away from me and do it herself, and not let me have the joy of being able to offer something like that to my son. Like, she wants to do it herself, you know. She took him to his first sports game, for example. He's really into sports. And so yeah, I was like, no, I'm putting my foot down. I'm going to teach him how to drive, and I'm going to teach him how to drive a stick shift, and of course an automatic, but that's so easy. But I want to teach him how to drive a stick shift. And then she said, well, actually, in this state, he has to take the class. He has to take a certified class in order to get his driver's license. So you can't teach him. And this was news to me. But I said, okay, fine, be that as it may. If you want to pay for the class, that's fine. But first I'm going to teach him. Before he takes that class, I'm going to teach him. And then fine, if he has to take the class just so that he can check that box and get approved for a driver's license, and so be it. But notice how that little law, that little regulation, served to disempower the man, the father, right, who traditionally wants to teach their son or kids how to drive, and takes that away from him and says, you know what? Your teaching is of no value because if you teach them, they won't be able to get a driver's license, at least in the state of Washington. And instead, they have to take a course. Now, this kind of law, women love it. They love these kinds of laws. They love these kinds of laws which take the kid away from the father and places them inside of an institution. Like public school has been a constant issue between me and my first wife. I didn't want public school. I wanted to only homeschool, but she was really gung-ho about just throwing them out there into the public school system. At all times, our system of law is pandering to the feminine. And so the irony is that at this high level, it is an epic concentration of alpha, perhaps toxic alpha, right? A very toxic masculinity at the very top. But it's shaping the world in accordance to the feminine. It's a weird paradox. And that's what we are living through right now, is the maturation of this reality, because humans have largely been living unconsciously. We've been just repeating actions based on our own compulsions and instincts. We're not really, those of us who are conscious enough to see this happen have to cringe every day at the happenings of the world, because we can see what's happening, but there's very little we can do other than changing ourselves. But if nobody else is doing the self-changing, then the course of humanity will persist as it has. So ladies, chivalry is alive and well. It's just that you chose to pick a different man. You chose to go for the top G. Big Daddy Government, Big Brother, or Mr. CEO, Mr. Corporation. That's your daddy now. And I'm sure that they are offering you their chair, and they are opening the door for you, and they are giving you all sorts of goodies. And to the rest of the men, boy, it's a struggle. It's a struggle to find your footing and find your masculinity in a world that is at all times trying to emasculate you and pulling this away and pulling that away from you. Like not being allowed to teach my kid how to drive. And it's a constant battle of just holding on. No, that's mine. I'm going to hold on to that. Thank you very much. And that's what men have to do. They have to draw the line. Men have to draw the line. I've written dozens and dozens of ideas for shows, but I only have time to record these things when I'm driving. And I'm driving usually when I'm dropping off my 4-year-old daughter at her mom's. And that doesn't happen very frequently. A couple times a week, once a week maybe. So, yeah, that's the only time I have to put out a show. Thank you for those of you who have subscribed and watched and commented. I will be going back to the subject of my previous video on the non-existence of narcissism and borderline and all that stuff, because someone commented and said that they really wanted me to explore that further. So thanks for saying that. I definitely will. Oh, and you know, this whole fractal idea of things happening at different levels, there's only one exception to that I've been able to find. And that's what I talked about in the very first video that I posted on this channel. There's only one exception to that. And I find it peculiar. It makes me think that maybe life is really about that one thing. Thanks for watching.